So first of all, it's always very emotional to be partaking in this seminar that is very, very dear to my heart. And it's a difficult seminar to do, a difficult conference. And in recognizing that, I would like to thank for the bottom of my heart the Enlightenment Spiritist Society of here, this group that has opened its doors to promote this event in New York. Because I will tell you, that is not every center or every place that has the capacity to embrace this proposal. And I'm very moved by Flavio's lecture, so I'm trying to recover from it. But we're going to talk about this topic, dictatorship of gender. Marlon said that his lecture was the most difficult one, and that's his idea, which I profoundly respect, but disagree. And so I'm going to start mine with a disclaimer. This is not a political talk. The views of this presentation do not reflect any political party in the US or abroad. They reflect the current psychological knowledge around gender and the views of immortality. The author, myself, is not a psychologist and therefore is open to corrections and suggestions related to any possible misunderstanding of the psychological aspects. In fact, I just published on Facebook one of the many, many conversations that I had with my partner, Sherry, who is actually the psychologist, from about 6 to 6:30 every morning for a number of weeks in order to get a hold of the terminology. And you know, our conversation would go like this. I would review with her my lecture, and I would say, at this point, I want to talk about this. And she would look at me and she said, no, but you're not using the words correctly. And I'm like, okay, so let me try again. And so we actually had many conversations. I published a little piece of one of these conversations on Facebook. You can see that. But I want to mention this to say that this is very difficult for me because, for two reasons. Because I have gender bias, and we all do. We all do. And so realizing my own gender bias is difficult, but necessary, because that's the only way we can transcend it. But also, you know, just getting the right understanding in order to deliver it the best way possible, it was a preoccupation of mine. But let's go, because this topic, it's important to me to the extent that although I have my own gender bias, I have had my share of struggles in life because of gender bias. And one of the reasons why I also put the disclaimer is because when we launched the title of the talk, The Dictatorship of Gender, we got a few phone calls from people who were like, you know, what do you mean by that? What are you going to talk about? You know, people are like fearful of what I would be here talking about. But I'm going to start by bringing this picture that's actually, it was published by a student of mine on Facebook. She is pregnant right now, and she posted this this picture, and she actually promoted a live party on Facebook to disclose the gender of the baby, which I thought was, wow, times are very different indeed, right? So live party, and it was a major party on Facebook. But what is so confusing about this picture? Because it says, baby, la la la, gender reveal. So, what is so confusing? Gender is confusing. Gender, sex, what is to be revealed at this party, right? So what is to be revealed at the party? Is it a party to reveal the gender, or is it a party to reveal the sex of the baby, right? The biological sex. When we know that it's a boy, we have some gender expectations. We know the sex might be biologically a boy or a girl, but we actually don't know the gender of that baby. And that's where the challenges start. And because this is very complex, we're going to start by going back to the beginning and reviewing also some definitions that are important for us to understand. So, sex, Roberto addressed that earlier today, the explanation of sex, biological sex, being a male or a female. That alone is also a complex discussion because it's actually not as simple as it looks. Because in the definition of sex, there are hormones, there are chromosomes, and so it's more complex than just saying it's a male or female or intersex. But that's not the scope of our presentation. So let's look at the concept of gender. So when she said, what is the gender of the child? Was that particular person referring to what we have here? Refers to the psychological, social, cultural experiences and characteristics associated with the social statuses of a girl and women or boys and men. It includes assumptions, social beliefs, norms, and stereotypes about behavior, cognitions, and emotions of males and females. So that's the definition, which is a lot more complex than what we like to think. So I put in color those three different aspects that we're going to talk about briefly. So the first one is the psychological aspect. So the psychological aspect is how one identifies himself or herself, right? So it's your inner experience. So when we're talking about the psychological aspect of gender, we are talking about how you interpret yourself, how you identify yourself, your essence. Is the aspect of gender that comes from within. And from this perspective, I will say is the true aspect of gender, which for us as spiritists, we have a great advantage in understanding because we are immortalists. And we believe, so are here, in reincarnation, which means that we have had many lives in different bodies, with different sex, but not only that, we were born in different times, in different circumstances, in different societies, in different cultures. So our identity today is not only the result of the biological sex, the body, the garment that we were given at that particular incarnation, but also the social and cultural experiences that we internalize at that time. So our gender, how we identify ourselves psychologically, spiritually, in essence, is the sum of all these experiences. That's also not simple. It's a complex, and it's going to be what? It's going to be very unique to the experiences of each individual. It's personal. Gender identity, it's personal. But there's more to gender, as we can see in this definition. There's also the social and the cultural aspect. So when we look at the social aspect, we're looking at an aspect that is very powerful in our society. Because gender, our lives, our social interactions, they are structured around gender. Gender tells us about who someone else is, and also how I should relate to that person. So one of the most disturbing experiences can be to see someone and not be able to tell whether that person is a guy or a girl. I don't know if that has ever happened to you, but I remember many times looking, and then you feel that sense of inner discomfort, and then a sense of like, I gotta find out. I have to find out. And then you keep looking, and you keep analyzing, and you keep trying to figure out. It's almost like if you don't figure that out, the world is gonna fall apart, or something very serious is gonna happen. We must know, is it a boy or is it a girl? So gender, in that sense, really organizes our relations and the way that we relate to one another. And then we have the cultural aspects of gender, which we need to realize they change, and they change drastically, and they change in time, but they also change within cultures. So if you go, for example, to Indonesia, there they have 5 different types of gender. And there is one gender in particular that is considered a transcendental gender that encompasses all genders, so to speak. If we look at Nigeria, for instance, before the time of colonialism in Nigeria, gender was non-existent in a society. In other words, it had no weight in that society. The society was organized and structured around other values, but not around gender in the way that our societies are. But even more interesting in the cultural aspect of gender is what we call gender expression. So gender expression is how we express our genders, right? So it is basically the thoughts, our actions, our behaviors, how we dress, how we relate, certain behaviors that are expected from us. All these defines gender expression. And so just to give you a little bit of a history in gender that's very, very interesting. In the 1980s in France, there is an infants magazine that the manufacturer wrote a note about the issue of gender. This is 1918. And the note says, there has been a great diversity over the subject of gender, but the generally accepted rule is that pink is for boys and blue is for girls. And he goes on by saying, the reason why is that pink is a more decided and stronger color and more suitable for boys, whereas blue is more delicate, is prettier, and then it's more suitable for girls. When did the shift took place, right? At some point, but culturally speaking, pink was a great color for boys. Now, in the 16th century in France, for example, men was common for men to wear ruffles, have long curly hair. That was the norm. But more surprising than that, high heels, believe it or not, were considered a distinctly masculine type of shoe. When did that change? Because I would like to review this rule. I think every, 100 years we should shift back and forth so that we could share more equally the pain, right? But so what does that tell us? It's funny, but what does that tell us? That outside of the psychological aspect of gender, everything else is what? Material. The social constructs, the cultural constructs, they're constructs of a time that relate to the material world so much so that they change. What does not change is, it changes in the sense that it evolves because it adds experiences, is our inner self, is the psychic, right? So that's the first distinction that I want to make clear in the concept of gender. And one place where you can look at Andre's new book about transgender has this very nice chart that helps us to understand these concepts very nicely. And I put right there, Andre Moreira, with permission, he allowed me to publish, put here on my slide, the picture from his book. So it's a really nice chart when you want to explain to someone the difference between what you would call biological sex, gender expression, gender identity. And what this also shows us is that under this concept, the concept immortality, gender identity is a non-binary concept. And this is very important because we tend up to these days to think in binary terms. And everything that is outside of the binary a lot of times challenges us. In the same way, gender expression is no longer your Barbie and your Thor. I don't know, that's what came to my mind right now, right? There is a multitude of expressions in between these two extremes that are also accepted. Because we are immortal beings with unique and distinct experiences. So that is in line with the Spiritist paradigm or the paradigm of immortality. Okay. But we do live still very much these paradigms of masculinity ideology and feminine ideology. And what we tend to do is, or the binary, and so what we tend to do, we tend to assign to people, depending on the sex, the biological sex, certain characteristics and certain qualities that we expect them to have. And this is the same thing to think. If you were born with yellow eyes, you should have these certain characteristics. And if you were born with purple eyes, you should have these other characteristics. And if by any chance you fall outside of these little boxes here, right, then there is something either pathological or immoral about you. And that still permeates this concept, this idea, this feeling permeates our society, right? So this, it's all research. It's not me talking. The research is cited over there. So masculinity ideology, you are a man. If you are anti-femininity, right? Anything, any trait of feminism, right? Because to be a female, we're going to talk about that. We're going to get to the female part. It's inferior. We still think that. We still believe that. We still live that. It's still present in our society in so many ways, although we have made significant progress. Right? But there is still a very strong association with women being less worthy. So achievement, skill of the appearance of weakness, advantage, risk-take, stoicism, competitiveness, assertiveness, ambitious, confidence, more holy. Men are more holy than women. Roberto, I think, talk about this too, right? This Eve, you know, this sinner, this impure woman who seduced the man and who is responsible for all the calamities that happen afterwards. Well, that is still ingrained in our psychics. And so men are more holy. So in many, many religions, women are unable to reach the more holy positions, right? They still belong only to men. Only men can be the leaders of certain religions. For that reason, because men are more holy than women in general. And for women, what do we expect? Nurturers, passivity, helplessness, preoccupation with appearance, more carnal in the sense of we are the dirty ones, right? And less holy. So those are the ideologies that are commonly assigned to these genders. Very good. Let me see here. Okay, so moving forward, I want to ask you to take a quick look at these two next slides. I'm going to leave them for like a couple seconds so you guys can look at it. This is the first one. And this is the second one. So, when we look at these pictures, and let me go back to this one here, I would like to ask you, is Serena less of a woman than Gisele? Well, who knows, right? For some people, we may, because, is women really supposed to have that much muscle mass in their bodies, right? A lot of people would look at her and say, oh, look like a man, and then becomes less woman in their perception. Is Diane Keaton less a woman than Gisele because she likes to wear masculine clothes from time to time? Is Julia Roberts' identity, female identity, jeopardized by the tie she's wearing? And for that matter, is mine. Because if she can wear, so can I, right? Right. I'll talk about that later. Right? So what is, and we can go even further. We can, ask the same questions about this guy. Is Caetano Veloso more or less of a man than Sylvester Stallone or Brad Pitt? And then we can also, ask ourselves, these guys, do they all identify as men? Maybe they do, maybe they don't, right? Do they identify as fluid? Maybe they identify completely outside of the binary. So we cannot tell, right? Because we see different gender expressions, but we don't know. Gender expression is different than gender identity. We don't know how they identify. We can only tell how gender is being expressed differently in a continuum. As far as I know, they all cisgender, right? So they all identify with their biological sex, but the gender expression is very different. And I think we have made progress in terms of recognizing and accepting that to some extent. We'll get to that. But for some of us, in looking at this picture, we may feel some discomfort with some of those expressions. And so it's important that we talk a little bit about gender bias that we all have. So it refers to the beliefs and attitudes that involve stereotypes and preconceived ideas about roles, abilities, and characteristics of males and females that may contain significant distortions and inaccuracies. Gender bias. It's a concept that I think we all understand. But there is also something called gender role socialization. And what is that? It refers to the process through which children learn culturally prescribed behaviors, which most often reinforces gender stereotypes. So we have our psychology, what we bring as immortal beings, and then we have the stuff that is taught to us, not from the moment we are born. It starts before that. Before that. And we not only learn that, we grow up believing that those concepts are truth. And many times, if we find anything within us that divert from what we have told to be the truth, we either get depressed or we do what Marlon was talking about, I think was Marlon, we split that part from us and put into our unconscious. And we're going to talk about this phenomena in a little bit more. But so gender is something that starts, gender identity development begins before birth, shaped by the expectations the parents and other significant adults have for how a baby, how a boy or a girl should be treated, and how he or she should behave. So it's a boy. Folks, it's a boy. The baby's a boy. At the party, we found out the baby's a boy. What comes to your mind? What should we do immediately? buy a baseball cap, right? A truck, right? Or go running, get the first blue clothing for the little boy. Yeah, onesie, a blue one, because now we know it is a boy. So it starts from the very beginning. And then when the baby, the way you're going to talk to the baby in the womb. Hello, boy. Dad is here waiting for you. We're going to play some football when you come out of there. Hello, my princess. I hope you're doing well in there. Mama is getting your pink room ready for when you come out. We talk differently, with different tones of voice. And I will tell you what, in putting this lecture together, I realized how I speak differently to my boy and to my girl. And I get emotional because I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why must I be harsher with him? Where does that come from? And in realizing that, I started to change little by little. I said, Jake, come here. I love you. Let me give you a hug. Put your head right here. Let me hold you tight. In treating him with more gentleness in my voice, because why should I be less gentle with him? Because he's a tough boy. And then the baby's born. And we handle the babies differently. We hold the babies differently. We get that little boy, and as soon as he starts like opening his eyes, we are turning him upside down and holding by the foot and throwing him up in the air. But the girl, God forbid, we're going to hold her tight and protect her because she's frail. It's a little girl. It's the princess. This is the power of gender, which has nothing to do with the spirit. You don't know. You don't know who that spirit is. You don't know where he or she has been, what experience he or she brings from the previous lives. But that's what we do. That's what we do. And I'm not here to say, oh, everything is wrong. No, I'm not saying everything is wrong. I'm just trying to work on the awareness of how limiting, and as we will see, harmful, these gender ideas taken in a very narrow perspective can be to the immortal being. So we have many male friends who have families and have children. Reminds me of the picture that Flavio showed us of the two guys with the 3 kids. And they will share with us very often this experience of being like, especially when the kids were little, and being at airports or public places, and people around would be looking. And this particular couple is very interesting because the guy is blonde and American, the other guy is dark hair and Jewish, and their boy is African American boy. So people would look at them and say, what is this? And most importantly, where is the mother? Where is the mother of this child? And here we start seeing the complexities and the difficulties, because if you think that 2 men are incapable of love, nurturance, and affection, you are missing the immortal part. You are narrowing your vision because you know what? Femininity and masculinity, you call it if you want. I call all of this humanity. The spirit isn't this or that. The spirit is. The spirit is capable of every single one of these qualities, aptitudes. And we have been reincarnating. So those two guys are fully capable of love, nurturance, affection, as I am. Maybe more, because I think I had 1,000,000 lives recently as a man. And I'm still developing this side of mine. So don't let the physical trick you. You don't know. You don't know. So I am going to, bring it back, but I'm not going to read this because Roberto talked about it this morning very brilliantly, and so did Flavio, but we have to go back to these concepts. They both mentioned, right, about, I've been talking about it, that, in Spiritism, spirit do not have sex. And I want to just mention the second paragraph here as a reference. This is in the book, Evolution of Two Worlds by Andrea Lewis, and it talks about something that we are not yet able to understand. Andrea Lewis speaks about that, and he says, I'm saying this, but I'm not going to get into this because I cannot speak about angels because I don't know how it functions. But what I want to say about this is it's cited there in the book that in the future, and it says in millenniums of years, when we become pure spirits, right? That's the final destination. For now, by all means, we need these physical distinctions because of the experiences that we have. But the goal, the ultimate goal is that we are going to reach this place that he calls the angelical situation, in which the individual will have all the noble inheriting characteristics of femininity and masculinity reflecting in him herself, in the more advanced degrees of perfection, the glory of the Creator. I was coming here today in the Metro Rail, and I was thinking about the song by Pepeu Gomes. Yeah, I know, I'm that old. And where he talks that to be a feminine man does not hurt his masculine side. If God is boy and girl, so am I, right? And that is, I was like, wow, that came to my mind in the Metro Rail, and I was like, that is that. That is what Andrea Lewis is telling us, right? If God is boy and girl, so am I. So the challenge that we have with the issue of gender is this. We are trying to fit the immortal into the narrow expectations of mortality. And we're telling people that this is how they need to fit, and if they don't fit, there is a problem. And a lot of times, like I mentioned before, we make this problem a problem of morality. So people, when we incarnate in these bodies and in this very, very, very narrow expectations they're placed upon the spirit, we experience what psychologists are going to call gender role restraints, which is defined as a psychological situation in which gender roles demands have negative consequences on the individual or others. The negative effect of gender role restraint are mental and physical for individuals and for relationships. So gender role restraints, and a lot of gender role conflict is going to take place. And gender role conflict is defined problems resulting from adherence to rigid, sexist, or restrictive gender roles learned during socialization that result in personal restriction, devaluation, or violation of others and of self. So these are two important concepts. So a lot of times it's very difficult for the spirit to conform again to these very narrow expectations related to gender, as if gender has dictates how one needs to be. And so for a lot of people, and I will share this to you, right? Something very personal. So I like wearing ties, right? Not a lot, once in a while. I think it's fun. It's fun. Actually, I find particularly sexy to mix male and female clothes. I love that. And my partner loves that too, so we're in accordance. But I recently went to do a conference in Brazil. And I was like, I'm gonna take my tie. I chose my outfit and I put in my suitcase. And when I got to Brazil, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. Why couldn't I do it? For two reasons. One, because I realized that in that moment it was more important for me to be liked and accepted than to wear my tie. Two, because my mother traveled with me. And I didn't want to hear talk in my ears. In fact, I didn't want to upset her because she gets very upset sometimes with these gender, differences. So up to this day, I mean, she's working on it. She's working on it. I'm happy, and we're working on it together, right? Now, another day, an artist, and I wish I could remember her name. Sherry sent me this little video. It was this week, whose son loves to wear dresses. He's 5, 6 years old. He wants to be a designer. He already knows he wants to be a designer. He loves to draw dresses and he loves to wear them. And he goes to school and he wears the dresses. And the parents both, very cool. He loves dresses, let him wear the dresses. But then one day he stopped wearing the dresses because, the kids in school were giving him a hard time. But then suddenly he put the dress again and went to school. And the mother said, but did your friends stop giving you a hard time? He said, no, they continue to give me a hard time, but I love wearing dresses too much. And I was like, he's doing better than me. He's doing better than me. But this, put lightly, is what gender conflict and the expression, gender expression, the roles, feels like on a day-to-day. Not being able to fully and freely express who you are because you're afraid on how people are gonna judge you, if you're gonna be accepted, if you're gonna be loved, if you're gonna belong, which is a very, very core human need. Everybody wants to belong. So the American Psychology Association did 40 years of research, and this has been published in 2 documents in 2018. Guidelines on how to treat men is one article, and the other one is the guidelines for women, which was initially published in 2007, and they did a review because of all the changes in women's role and published a new one now in 2018. But in the guidelines, they say that initially they thought that research have assumed that masculinity and femininity were opposite ends of a spectrum, and healthy psychology entailed identifying strongly with the gender roles confirmed by a person's biological sex. So for a long time, psychologists thought that for you to be mentally healthy, you needed to strongly associate with your biological sex. And that vision has changed, has evolved. The document states that traditional masculinity is psychologically harmful, and socializing boys to suppress their emotions cause damage that echoes both inwardly and outwardly. So what it's saying is this: when this masculine ideology is taken to the extreme with rigid ways, saying that men should not cry, that men should be always tough, right? That is absolutely extremely harmful to men's psychology. And we're gonna see in which ways. So it says that men with very, very strong beliefs about masculinity, they're less likely to seek for health care because men don't get sick, right? And getting sick and going to doctors and need help and needing someone to assist, that's for women, it's for weak people. So they're more likely to take normal risk health behaviors, and these are, it's super fun, it's such as heavy drinking and avoiding vegetables. So guys, please eat your vegetables. They're more negative about seeking mental health services. They're convinced that they need to be self-sufficient. and able to take care of themselves. And anything outside of these norms needs to be kept secretive. They experience isolation and believe not to be okay. And the level of depression among men is sky high. But many times it's not correctly identified by psychologists because men is not going to express depression the same ways of women. A lot of times they're angry. A lot of times they are being hostile and violent, but truly, they're suffering tremendously internally, but are unable to express that. So the ramifications of that is we see violence extremely high among men, either killing or killing themselves. Life expectancy to be much lower than women in general. And we have talked about, the rates of suicide that, women attempt suicide, but men is way more successful in doing that. So those are the ramifications for men. How about women? So for women, we have sexism, right? We also mentioned this earlier today. And so women have to deal with these unrealistic and stereotypical media images of girls and women intersect in various ways with girls and women's vulnerabilities about self-esteem, eating disorders, depression, sexual development, general well-being, and feelings of belonging. Girls are pervasively exposed to messages that encourage an appearance-based appraisal of social worth. When you see a girl, what is the first thing you say? Oh, darling, how cute you are. Consistently, right? Consistently. We don't say to the boys, oh, hey, how pretty you are. We don't say that. It's a difference. So that's the message that the girls get. They need to be pretty and conform to what the media is telling them, how they should be. And then we have sexual harassment, gender inequities in the workplace and affecting women's health in diverse ways. Other than sexism, we have devaluation and discrimination. So discriminatory practices in school, workplace, disparities of payment, disparity of promotion practices with women, barriers in religious institutions for more advanced positions. So all of those things are challenges that women experience, with also some ramifications, such as women experience great levels of depression, very high number of 10 times more likely, in fact, to have eating disorders than boys, and decreased self-esteem and sense of identity. They have done a research where they have a group of girls that were going to take a test. And they divided in two groups. And one group, the girls just went ahead and took the test. And the other group, before they started the test, they had to answer if they were a boy or a girl. And so they were primed for gender. And so this group that actually checked that they were girls, they performed significantly lower than the other group who was not primed for gender prior to taking the test. What does that say? You're a girl, you're incapable. You're not supposed to be doing math. You know what I mean? This is for boys, right? So these are the messages that are in us, right? Not from this lifetime, but from many lifetimes where this has been what we're dealing with. So we have some ramifications, general ramifications in this case. Profound dehumanization, deep effects on self-esteem of males and females. This is in general. And deep effects on the sense of belonging. And I would like to talk a little bit about this dehumanization, right? What does that mean by dehumanization? So with the concepts of femininity and masculinity, we are pretty much reducing the spirit to these compartmentalized possibilities. And so when I tell that, a man is incapable of loving and caring for a child in the same way a woman is, Of course, there is biological differences. You talk about delivering a baby, but this is different. We're talking about something else. The ability to care for, right? So if we tell that a man, if we believe that a man is capable of that, we are dehumanizing, because the spirit, again, the spirit just is. Just is. The spirit is capable of absolutely all these qualities and all these feelings. And that is, as I have mentioned, our final destination. So anytime that we look at someone and think that they are incapable of having certain expression, a certain quality, we are dehumanizing that person. We have made some progress, and I would like to share with you some things that we see nowadays in the media, right? So there's now a campaign called Real Men, Real Depression. It's okay, right, to be depressed. Men do have feelings, men do cry. So there are actually campaigns to tell men that, yes, they are entitled to be depressed. It's okay. They're not less men because of that, right? There is the Institute of Child Psychology. I love this. Boys will be, not boys, but respectful and responsible for their actions. Boys cry, and that's okay. Act like a human. Be kind and be yourself. So these are being taught to children. So the message is, we are moving forward. There is some hope. And what we can do, like Flavio was talking, is we need to work on our own biases. We all have them, you know? And so recognizing where is the bias, right? Why do I feel like that? And I'll give you a hint. I mentioned this in one of the other seminars that we did, but this is a guy, a neighbor of mine in Miami Shores, who opened a group of men to talk about men's vulnerability. So it's a group of guys who get together. We all have our own struggles and need for support. Find the courage to be vulnerable and ask for help when you are struggling. Have the courage to reach out and support someone in need. Be courageous. Join the conversation. So guys that sit together to share with one another their vulnerabilities, which women are much more likely to do with one another. The funny thing about this is that the group is called Whiskey Six. So they sit together and drink whiskey. So what they do is they share their vulnerabilities, and right there they numb it. So we need to send a psychologist to the group to help them, once they share the vulnerabilities, to process it, right? That is where the strength really lies. The courage to talk about it and the courage to bear it. And in bearing it, feeling the human within you, right? The spirit. So that is really the courage and the strength. And then this is very recent from the Herald, Miami Herald newspaper. This article that talks about the evolution of fatherhood shines light on a true partnership. And she's going to say here, today, dads, at least the ones I know, don't fit well into what for decades had been considered men's traditional duties at home. They now change diapers, take their children to the doctor, assisting homework, ferry them to extracurricular activities, all while holding down full-time jobs. So there's more room for men to express, to live, and to enjoy this side that has been for so long told them it was not okay. It was the woman's role, and they should stay out of it. And wrapping up, we have a lot of challenges still, although we have progress, some challenges remain, right? So gender continues to be very closely monitored and policing in our society, and a lot of times exercised coercively, right? And for a lot of people, these gender norms continue to be experienced as truths. And anyone who diverts from that, they are being punished. And that is really the courage and the strength. And then we have a lot of challenges still, although we have progress, some challenges remain, right? So gender continues to be very closely monitored and policing in our society, and a lot of times exercised coercively, right? And for a lot of people, these gender norms continue to be experienced as truths. And anyone who diverts from that, can be many times on the other side of hostility, discrimination, and unacceptance. So, quick exercise. How much femininity can appear in a man before it is too much, before he becomes unintelligible to us as a man? This is a question done by Ken Corbett, which is actually a psychologist here in New York. He asked that. So let's see. You see a guy, right? And you understand that guy, as a man, right? At which point he becomes unintelligible as a man to you. He crosses the line. It's too much. I can't take this, right? So is it if he shaves his hair, legs, chest, arms? Is it if he wears tight pants or has long hair or cross the legs like a woman or wears pink shirts or wears earrings or have the nails painted? Where do you cross the line and say, no, that's enough? Because maybe there is a line still for all of us. And so each one knows, where do you draw your line? What becomes unacceptable? That you can no longer understand that person as a man, right? How much can we take until the discomfort is so huge that we must devalue, hurt, or kill another human being? Because maybe you are unable to kill someone, but we can kill with words. We can kill with our attitude. We can kill with despise. But sometimes it becomes so much, and we get to the phenomenon called otherizing. So we are all holy beings, right? But for some of us, it's very challenging because society said to be a man, you should be this way. And if you identify anything that is outside of that truth, you cannot deal with that. You split that within you and put on your unconscious. Then comes someone else, another person. That other person comes in front of you. It's a man with the nails painted. It's a man with traits or something that bothers the hell out of you. Thank God it's not in me. It's there. It's the other. It's called the otherizing feeling. Is when we identify in others something that we have repressed within ourselves and we hate so much that we want to kill that person because he's putting in our face the feminine that we cannot withstand within ourselves. I asked Sherry, I said, explain to me why people kill. Why are they so bothered that they need to kill another human being? What is that? And so before we judge the one who kills, let's see our own killing instincts. Because we need to change the world by starting with ourselves, by understanding, by embracing everything that we are and understanding that every single expression of who you are is holy and needs to be loved and needs to be embraced and needs to be expressed. Because there is freedom, there is peace, and there is harmony in the ability to be who you truly are. Too much energy coming from here. The flowers couldn't take it. So moving forward, I skip a few slides, but I want to leave you guys with this. Some people are just plain more genderly than others, and this is okay. I like the idea of thinking about gender as something like color saturation. There are people who have high saturated genders, and for other people, it has a milder kind of valence. There is a lot of variation. I'd also call up an idea I'm fond of, gender as a necessary fiction. The crucial thing about these categories is to hold them very lightly. In the theoretical sense, we need a model in which gender categories can be a matter of life or death for some, and fluid and variable and transformable for others. So looking at gender as a color saturation, I love that idea. Support the positive. So, not everything is negative. Again, just leave the plants over there. Now you can see me better. I need your full attention. So, not everything to be tough. For a man to be tough, there are times where it's okay to be tough. So it's not about, everything being negative. So there are times on everyone's life when there is a need to be able to power through. But you only do that, and you believe that if you do not do that, then you are somehow less worthy as a person. There is a problem. It is important to discard the harmful ideologies of traditional gender roles and find flexibility in the potentially positive aspects. Okay? So that's the recommendation. And focus on the spirit, right? I like the idea of taking a second and looking at the person next to you. Are you able to look at that person? Look at the person next to you. Can you see beyond the physical body? Can you look at that person and really, really think that next to you there is an immortal spirit? And embrace that spirit with all that he or she is. That's the exercise. What do we do when we live here? We practice to live as immortal beings. We practice to look at each other. I don't see your pants. I don't see your clothes. I don't see your tie. I hear you. I hear what you say. I can feel your heart. I can hear your ideas. I can hear your values. I can feel your energy. And for the spirit you are, I honor you and I love you. And that's, my dear friends, how we need to approach the world and every single person, especially the ones that challenge us the most. Because if you embrace those who challenge you the most, you embrace yourself first as a holy being that you are. My final thoughts, my first thoughts, my thoughts of every day, I would like to thank these two spirits who have joined my family and who teach me every day about spirit, about immortality, about respect, about giving him the pink jacket that he wanted so much, and he was so happy the day that he bought it. And the day that he asked me to put one earring, I said, Jakey, they're going to make fun of you in school. He said, I want it. And he went to school. And then a few months later, he came back, Mom, I want the second earring. Are you sure? Yes. And today he says, my earrings make me a very popular boy in school. I'm like, that's awesome, right? Or that little one with all that she teaches me about immortality and love. But above all, this one, who is everything in my life, and who is the one who sat with me, who teaches me. She teaches me so much. She's so much better. She knows so much more than I know. She makes me a better person. And she loves me by who I am without ever. Sometimes I tell her, should I keep my hair short or long? Whatever you want, sweetie. Right? And then, so to these three spirits, my gratitude, and to all of you, thank you very much.